For more on what the tax reform bill means to you, we are joined by Ed O'Keefe. He is a congressional reporter for The Washington Post and a CBS News contributor. He is in our Washington bureau. Ed, end of the year, high stakes. Let's talk about this tax reform bill. We've talked about Senators Corker and Rubio. Do we know if Senator Collins or Flake are in any way on the fence about this, or is this going to become law?
They're still holding out, but, you know, if history's any guide, they'll waver through the weekend so that we talk about them a little bit, and then suddenly they'll vote for it in the end. Look, all of these sort of last-minute undecideds have had various things that they wanted to make sure got in the bill. Senators have the right to do that and use their clout, and they've done that. And you saw changes at the last minute to the child tax credit, some assurances about health care. In the case of Flake, he's pushing to make sure that Congress is working on some kind of bipartisan deal to shore up the status of those dreamers, those young immigrants. That's a big concern of his, has been for years. All of this likely will eventually lead to all of the Republicans, it looks like, voting for this and sending it on to the president.
Who are the biggest winners in this plan, Ed?
Certainly corporations, Anthony. The corporate rate coming down to 21% is a very big deal, and the fact that that is permanent. Now, Republicans say, and certainly a lot of those that are pushing for this lower rate say, will allow for better planning, and they say will spur economic growth across the country. Critics, of course, are concerned about that. They also point out, as Errol did, that the individual rates are not permanent and will have to come up again for a vote or expire by 2025. So, you know, certainly it is being cast as something that's favorable to the wealthiest in this country and to corporations, and on paper, that's certainly true.
And Senator Rubio got what he wanted in terms of the child tax credit. Will Senator Collins get what she wants as far as securing the fate of the health insurance markets?
Well, as of right now, she has no written assurance, and there's no scheduled vote on the legislation that would do what she wants. So she is taking a bit of a gamble here. Healthcare remains a big concern in her state, given its aging population, and just given the fact that she heard throughout this year from constituents who don't want the current healthcare system really to be changed in any dramatic way. But I don't think they would string along Susan Collins and then not make good on their promise. The question is, at what point and how would Congress consider this next year?
And this tax bill, which is also sort of a health care bill in a way, will remove the Obamacare mandate starting in 2019. Now, the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, says, you know, that could lead to higher premiums and that as many as 13 million Americans will become uninsured. Is there a potential price to pay for that in this legislation for Republicans?
Absolutely. Democrats have already made a point that, you know, this is now putting out 13 million people. The Republican argument is that the tax for not having health care, or the penalty for not having health care, is in fact a tax, so that by removing it, you are in essence reforming the tax system and lowering the burden on folks. They also say, they argue, that a lot of the people who have been penalized by this law are actually lower income individuals who cannot afford health care plans under the current system. And so that's why they want to keep pushing for reforms to make individual health care plans more affordable. But you're right, the argument is that tens of millions of people now are out of health insurance. It will be a campaign issue next year for sure. Democrats are already making hay out of it, and they will continue to do so for sure.
Ed, what happens to people in blue states who rely on the state and local tax deductions?
It is an interesting element of this, Alex. If you live right there in New York, across the river in New Jersey, up in Connecticut, out in California, Illinois, Maryland, those are higher tax states. And they've been accustomed to being able to deduct your state and local taxes. At this point, it'll be capped at $10,000. That is a notable deduction still, but in some cases, you're going to have people now ending up paying higher taxes because they live in those states, and their local and state property taxes can't be deducted as much as they were before. That was part of the reason why we are likely to see at least a handful of House Republicans from those states, mostly suburban swing districts, probably vote against this plan next week because they still believe it's unfair to their constituents.
All right, Ed O'Keefe in Washington this morning. Ed, thanks very much for being with us.
Take care.